On this episode of the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show, we're talking about when to walk away from a deal and subsequently maybe when not to walk away from a deal. And now to the show.
Welcome to the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show, where we bring you insights into the local Central Virginia real estate market, go in-depth to answer your real estate questions and concerns, and interview local figures and influencers in the greater Richmond area. And now, let's get to the latest episode with your host, Chris Elliott, and co-host, Maddie Ray.
Hey. This is Chris Elliott with Remax Action.
And Maddie Ray, also with Remax Action.
Heyo. Episode number 7 of the podcast. We are in the new studio, new digs, new producer, my main man, Daniel Jones. Daniel, let us hear you.
What's up, guys?
Daniel's gonna like cipher in or whatever edit in a picture of his face, like just a face shot that's gonna like scroll across the video, right, Daniel? Oh wow, we got sound effects now. We are cooking with grease or with gas, whatever the saying is.
It's gas, but good try.
Hey, what do you think of the new studio?
It's
Madison?
kind of boring. No, Christopher. It's kind of boring, but you know.
Okay. All right. Well,
we'll work on it.
Yeah, we'll work on it.
Work in progress.
I like it because it's two doors down from my office.
Yeah.
As opposed to our last studio, which is a little ways away. We want to thank Studio 77 very much. Give them a shout out right here for getting us off the ground. So exciting new announcement. Daniel is our new marketing manager for the team. So he's going to be handling all of our photos, our video, our audio, anything to do with electricity is going to be Daniel's job.
That was an electricity.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
The lightsaber.
He does sound effects too. Daniel's also going to be managing and pushing our social media efforts. So very, very excited to have him on the team. Welcome to the team, Daniel.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Yep. Very cool. Very cool. Maddie, how have you been?
I've been good.
Do you feel like the first child that now there's like a second child and like attention's being split?
No, I know that I'll always be the favorite in your eyes.
Wow. It's kind of like when my second daughter was born, like my first, I think she kind of realized real quick, like she wasn't going to get the same.
If you have another, it's going to be even worse for Julia because then she has middle child syndrome. So, you know, Charlotte will get the attention because she's the oldest, and then your new one will be the baby.
Yeah, we're putting money away for therapy. We figure.
Yeah.
At least I'm a middle child, and you see how I turned out.
Yeah, there you go.
Me too. I needed extensive therapy.
Oh
so.
God.
Thanks, Mom and Dad.
Yikes. Okay. So anyway, what are we actually talking about business-wise today, Maddie? What are we talking about?
We're talking about when to walk away from a deal.
When to walk away from a deal. So we're going to be chatting about circumstances in which you want to walk away from a deal and subsequently when you may not want to walk away from a deal. But first, let's give them the locals news update.
All right.
Talk to us. What's the first thing here?
A mixed-use development called Courthouse Landing.
Yes, in Chesterfield County. Do you want to read the little snippet from...
Snippet?
Snippet? There we go.
Yeah, when you slow it down, it kind of sounds weird, doesn't it?
You added a T where there's a P, so
All right,
snippet, not snitbit.
Just read the damn paper, please.
Watch your language. A group of out-of-state developers with a focus on commercial and mixed-use projects is planning what it calls Chesterfield's new downtown in the heart of the suburban city.
Suburban county.
Whoops, I can't read. Documents submitted to the county.
Was it tough for you in grade school when they were like, Maddie, would you read chapter 3?
I would always right before they picked a new person, I would be like, oh, I have to go to the bathroom. So I would just leave real quick and then come back. And by the time I got back, they were done calling on people.
Nice.
So good old Goochland education.
Yeah, there you go.
Documents submitted to the county show a mixed-use development with a hotel, 400,000 square feet of retail and office space, and hundreds of new homes planned for 122 acres southeast of the Route 288 Iron Bridge Road interchange and undeveloped land between the interstate and Courthouse Road east of Iron Bridge. Are we anchors on a news podcast right now? Because that's how I'm feeling.
Yep.
Reading a teleprompter.
So 400,000 square feet of office and retail space. That's a lot of square feet. 150 hotel room, 650 multifamily homes. Tell me, does anybody think this somewhat sounds like another West Broad Village, except in Chesterfield County?
I hadn't thought of it that way, but now that you bring it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first thing that came to my mind. What's very interesting is while Greengate in Western Shore Bump is doing good, West Broad Village is not doing too hot right now.
Really?
As far as they've lost several retailers. Keegan's went left. Carolina Ale House, which I love that place from South Carolina, left.
That bar that was on the corner there, right on the same street as Keegan's. I can't remember what it was called.
Yep.
That place left.
Kona went out of business, so it's going to be interesting to see. This is a big development, so somebody's putting a lot of money behind this courthouse landing. So I would assume they've done some more research and maybe a little smarter than we are. Maybe not.
Maybe they could bring a new Keegan's.
There you go. Maybe
I liked Keegan's.
Maybe Keegan's is moving there.
That would be great.
That would be cool.
I miss Keegan's.
Yeah, I'm not going to drive all the way down there though. So anyway, so that is that. What do we got next, Miss Maddie?
More golf news.
Top Golf. So
As if Drive Shack wasn't enough.
Well, they're kind of like the same thing from what I understand.
I think like the Top Golf one is trying to be more like the trendy, like off the rails one, but they're basically the same kind of like idea, right?
I think the Top Golf is the more prevalent one. Like they've got more locations throughout the country. I think Drive Shack's kind of like the Me Too type business. But it's interesting. So this one's in Scott's Edition. So a little bit different crowd, different location. I think the Top Golf will do good in Scott's Edition just because you've got so many bars and so much cool stuff happening in. I think they'll both do well. It'd be very interesting. It's kind of funny how it's kind of like when grocery stores came to Richmond a couple of years ago. Like all of a sudden we had all these grocery stores, and now it's like we go from 0 to 2 driving range places, which I thought was kind of funny.
You know when they opened that new cool bowling alley? It's like River City Roll or something like that.
Yes, that's in Scott's Edition as well.
That was successful. So I imagine this place will be too.
There's a shuffleboard place. We need to do like a Scott's Edition tour.
Can we go to the arcade bar?
That place is awesome.
I've never been.
Circuit, so much fun.
So
can we go?
Social media, let us know some feedback. Here's what I'm thinking. If we can start some community tours. We can start in Scott's Edition. We can do maybe like a brew tour and then write it all off on our taxes because it's a business expense at that point.
Yes.
Hopefully nobody from the IRS is listening. Last but not least, speaking of Scott's Edition, I'm taking this one for myself. We got a food hall that is opening in Scott's Edition with Vale Brewing as the anchor tenant. Going to be super cool. There's going to be space for 18 other vendors plus a rooftop bar. That sounds like
I've never been to a rooftop bar.
You've never been to a rooftop bar?
Well, okay, funny story. David and I tried.
You like fell off a roof one time and then
Yeah. David and I tried to go to a rooftop bar.
But you guys were like 17 and they were like, sorry.
No. I had a fake ID. Anyway. My parents already knew that, so it's fine. We tried to go to the one that's downtown, and I looked on like Google to see like its hours, and then we got there and then the Google hours were wrong, so we just looked like idiots like rolling up there and it's not even open. We were really sad.
What time did you go?
It was a Saturday at like 5, I think.
That's a weird time
like 3 or 5.
That's a weird time for a bar to be closed.
I've got a friend who works at one of the rooftop ones, and they have weird times. So it'll be like a lunch hour, like an hour actually, and then they'll come back and do like a sunset, and then they just don't work the rest of the day at that bar.
So there's Cabanas. There's that place downtown that's on top of the hotel. And
that's where
the Graduate.
There's the Graduate, which is in that hotel.
The Graduate.
I've got a friend that works there. It's a great bar.
It seems really cool.
Absolutely.
Seems really cool. We need a rooftop bar and shore pump is what we need. So
yeah, because I don't want to drive all the way out there. It's so hard to park down there, and I don't like it.
I'll tell you what. That's why I love Scott's Edition though, because it's kind of like it's going down the city, but it's the closest like segment of the city comparable to. Maddie's looking it up right now.
It's so pretty.
Yeah, it's kind of nice. So maybe we'll do an outing there.
Ooh.
All right. So that is the news. So, Maddie, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about when to walk away from a deal and when not to.
Yes. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through. So I was writing this show last night, came up with 4 scenarios. Now, of course, there's many reasons the deal can start to get a little shaky. But there's shaky. There's 4 main times that I would say that a deal starts getting a little wobbly and might fall apart. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through those scenarios. We're going to talk about it from the perspective of both buyers and sellers. And then we're also going to talk about maybe when you don't want to walk away from a deal, when it makes sense to walk away and when it makes sense not to walk away. So what is our first subtopic, Miss Maddie?
Inspections. This is like the biggest part that a deal might fall apart, right?
Yeah, usually that's where, I don't have any statistics, but I would imagine if you did a survey or if you looked it up, the majority of deals that are going to fall apart on inspections. Number 2 being appraisals, which we'll get to next. But we usually tell people, hey, if you can get past the inspection, you can get past the appraisal, you're in pretty smooth waters from there. So first, from the perspective of a seller. So if you are a seller, a good time to walk away from a deal is when a buyer is being unreasonable with their repairs request and the cost of fixing those is worse than what you might be able to get by relisting, or the cost associated with relisting the property. We actually had a deal, no names or addresses to be mentioned, that this just happened.
Is that the one?
Mr. S. We'll call him Mr. S.
Oh, I thought you were talking about Miss F.
Miss F. I don't even know who that is. I can't think right now.
The one where we got that inspection addendum back and it was very hefty.
That was Mr. S.
No, I mean like tens of thousands hefty.
Oh, yeah. So we've had a couple. So what we're talking about here, so when it would make sense as a seller, what would make sense for a seller is if a buyer is just asking for all types of crazy stuff that makes absolutely no sense. It's stuff that does not need to be fixed. And if going back on the market is going to be cheaper than actually fixing this stuff. So what I mean by that is like, hey, if maybe let's say there's $5,000 worth of repairs and they are asking $3,000 of that is like, hey, we're going to see this on any contract we get. But $2,000 is stuff where like fluff items or nickel and dime items, if that makes sense. And maybe we wouldn't see that on the next contract. The one thing that you've got to kind of think through with that is, hey, even if they're asking for $2,000 stuff that isn't legitimate or we think is, subjective or obnoxious, if you go back on the market, are you going to get as high of an offer?
Or any offers at all? Yeah,
or a second offer at all. And does it make sense to maybe just eat that $2,000 knowing you're losing the battle, quote unquote, but you're still winning the war of you still get to go to closing if you've got a good enough offer?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. When does it not make sense to walk away, Maddie?
Don't walk away if defects are going to pop up again.
Yeah. So when it does not make sense to walk away is if you've got, let's say you got crawl space issues, you got a foundation issue, or you got something that popped up that, hey, if we don't correct this, it's going to pop up again. Like this isn't subjective. It's an objective thing. It's a material defect
that you're going to have to deal with one way or the other.
Yeah. And normally the conversation with our clients is like, hey, we either fix it for this buyer that we have a pending transaction with, or we fix it for the next buyer that may or may not come around, so it's kind of that question of like, am I going to see this again? If I'm going to see it again, yeah, it probably makes sense to go ahead and fix it now. I wouldn't walk away from a deal just because you're not happy with what they found, if what they found is going to come back again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? The other thing, and I'll just throw this little side note in there. So sometimes we'll have sellers that are like, well, I'm just going to sell as is, meaning, hey, I've had a defect that's been revealed. I don't feel like shelling out the money to fix it. So now I'm just going to sell the property as is. Well, that tremendously hurts your marketability of that home, and the price that you may be able to get for that home selling it as an as-is property might be significantly lower than if you don't put that label on the house. Daniel, as a non-real estate person, does that make sense?
Yeah. So like, I'm not wanting to repair maybe my roof right before I sell the house. It's let's say $15,000 put in a roof on my entire house.
Yeah.
It's like, do I want to pay that and then try to sell the house, or just sell the house and be like, hey, we're taking like the cost of my $15,000 out. But that, like, if I'm buying a house, I don't want to have to put a new roof on it. I want you to have done that for me. That really hurts me as somebody who's like, a layman that wants to get that house, right? So that completely turns me off of the house.
Yeah, and what I tell people is like when you try to sell your house as is, it's kind of the equivalent of going onto a car dealership and the car dealer saying like, "Hey, if you buy this car, the second you drive it off the lot, it's your problem." You're kind of like, "What the hell is wrong with the car?" Like, and you know, how cheap do I have to buy this car to make sense of this car? Like, I have no clue what's wrong with it, and blah blah blah. So, putting that, you know, as far as is that an option to sell your house as is? Yes, it is an option. Is it a smart option?
Not often.
Not often.
Well, you know, a lot of people, when we first put their house on the market or when it first goes under contract, they'll say, "Oh, I'm selling it as is. Please make everyone aware of that." But like, you never really know. Like, some people are serious about it, and then others are like, "Well, yeah, maybe I'll be reasonable."
Yeah, like we had one. Once again, not to name names or mention addresses, but we had a property. It's a new construction house. It was a house that the seller built. Now they're not professional, you know, home builders or anything like that. But the conversation I had was like, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. X, you're selling a brand new house. If you're selling a brand new house as is, and you put that label on it, that's going to raise a lot of red flags. People are going to be like, why the hell are they selling this brand new house as is? Like, there's got to be something wrong with it." And that's usually what happens.
That's the exact scenario I was thinking of when I said that.
Oh, okay. Yep. Yeah. So it's selling as is, not exactly the best option there. All right. So moving on. Who are we talking about next?
Oh, wait. I was going to skip to the next thing. Whoops. Buyers.
Skip to the next thing.
I can't read. We've established this.
It's okay. All right. So buyers, when does it make sense to walk away from a deal? I would say the first time that it makes sense to walk away from a deal is if there are major or structural issues that a seller is unwilling to fix, i.e., you've got a busted AC unit, i.e., you've got a foundation issue in which the house could fall over, i.e., there's some very expensive or, you know, something that absolutely needs to be fixed on the house that they are just not willing to fix. This is not cosmetics. This is not minor. This is major, major stuff. That is when it absolutely makes sense to walk away from the deal. Maddie, what is the second point there?
If the cost of repairs makes the property grossly overpriced. Yep.
So here's another one. We just had the scenario where a buyer elected to walk away from a deal. Mr. and Mrs. A.
Were they? I wanted to ask. Were they your inspiration for this show?
They were the inspiration for this show. So we got some really good clients, really cool people, beautiful family, and we just walked away from a deal that they were setting to purchase, and this is what kind of inspired this show. Because they were really struggling with this. They really liked the house. They thought their kids, you know, be a good house for their kids to grow up in. It was, you know,
they like the neighborhood and everything. Like they love this house.
Love the neighborhood, very close to where they, you know, live right now. And they were kind of really struggling with, you know, like, we kind of get it. Like, we probably shouldn't move forward with this one, but man, we really love this house and we really want to do it. So this is, they are what inspired the show. So what happened with that one? What had happened was, we were paying top dollar for that house, and we kind of knew that going into it. They were willing to do that because they liked the house and because they liked the neighborhood that much. But if you look at a range of kind of like what homes were selling for in that neighborhood, I would say that they were definitely on the top end of that, and maybe arguably overpaying just a little bit. But what happened was, when we did the inspection, there were certain things that we agreed to take as is because we didn't think there were any major issues. And there came back, there were some major issues with that home that were totaling thousands of dollars. And the question they had was, okay, so now we're at the top end of what we feel like this home is worth. We're at the top end of what our personal affordability range is. And now on top of all that, so our payment's going to be kind of maxed out as far as where we're comfortable with. And then on top of that, we're going to have thousands of dollars of repairs that if we move forward with this house, that we're most likely going to be saddled with when it's all said and done. And I think we made one last offer to the seller. We said, hey, if you can do this, it would make sense for us to move forward. And they kind of balked, and we just decided at that point it just didn't make sense. But that is a legitimate reason to walk away.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you made an actual like offer.
We did actually make one last offer. They kind of balked. They said, we'll get back to you, and then they slept on it. And then the next day they were just like, you know what, we think you're right. You know, we just don't feel comfortable moving forward on this one. So
they were the ones that backed out.
They did. Yeah.
Not our side.
They did back out. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyway, Maddie, when does it not make sense to walk away from a deal?
It does not make sense to walk away from a deal if repairs totaling less than another home inspection come up.
Yeah, so kind of obvious math, Daniel, as a non-real estate person, this would make perfect sense.
Sure.
So you're going to spend $400 on a home inspection to inspect the property. Okay. So let's say you've contracted on property A, and property A is the one you're considering walking away from. Mm-hmm. If you've already spent $400 inspecting property A to find out that there's issues with it, if there's a $300 repair that needs to be made or be done on property A, and the seller's just not willing to budge, not willing to give it to you, it probably doesn't make sense to walk away from that and go find another house, because number one, you got to go find another house. Number two, you're going to go down to property B, and you're going to go to property B and spend $400 on a home inspection. And then, you know what I mean? Like, you're
and then we're at $100, right? So like I could go and get house A inspected. I had to put $300 into it, right, to get it repaired. And let's say I walk away from that. It's like $300. I don't want to do that for this house, whatever. Yeah. And then we get a house B, and we get that inspected for $400. And then an $800 repair shows up, and it's like, I shouldn't have walked away from that first deal. Yeah. Because that's a reasonable cost for me to pay, and not risk having either even just paying a separate fee,
or at the very least just to push the deal through.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, okay, if the cost of the inspection the cost of inspecting another property is going to total more than what the actual repair is, you might as well just keep the house that you've already decided that you wanted to buy. The other thing, when we get to this, is really just looking at the numbers. A lot of times emotions are running high during an inspection negotiation. People are getting offended, people are whatever. It's really taking a step back and just looking at it objectively and saying, okay, there's $1,500 worth of stuff here that we feel like should be fixed, that the seller's not willing to fix. Am I willing to walk away from this house that at one point I was very excited about, over $1,500? And we can't answer that question for you, but it's something to keep in mind throughout this whole deal.
That's part of the benefit of having, like, if you're a buyer and you're up in the air, like, do I really need an agent to represent me through this process? Like, that's one of the things that you come very handy in, because you're a third party who you obviously, not to say that you don't care, but you're not like, oh, I'm about to move into this house. Like,
I'm not yet an unemotional third party that is going to be able to talk you off the ledge. I feel like half of my job is keeping our clients from making bad decisions.
Well, that's what you do for me too. You make me not make bad decisions. You talk me off the ledge. So
I hope I don't have to talk you off the ledge too much.
You'd be surprised.
Oh gosh. Okay. Chris Elliott Real Estate, we'll talk you off the ledge. Don't jump. Is the name of my first book. All right, what's next, Maddie?
Appraisals.
All right, so this is typically once we've gotten past the inspection.
Can you define an appraisal for people who are not real estate savvy?
Woo! Thank you for the softball of a question. All right, so an appraisal. So if your offer is getting financed, or I guess you can get an appraisal if you're paying cash, but typically when somebody is getting a bank loan for a property, the bank is the one that's actually buying the property, or they're giving you the money to buy it, but essentially the bank's buying the property. So what they're going to do is they're going to say, okay, great, you've agreed to pay $300,000 for this house. Sellers agreed to take $300,000. Buyers agreed to give $300,000. At the end of the day, the bank's the one with the money. The bank's the one that's going to be left holding the property if the buyer defaults on the mortgage. So they're going to come in and they're going to hire a third-party appraisal company to come in, give their opinion on the value, make sure the house is actually worth what the buyer has agreed to pay for it. So what happens is sometimes if the appraisal comes up short, that can create an issue, because the seller goes, hey, look, you've agreed to pay me $300,000. Now your appraiser is saying it's only worth $295,000. I still want $300,000. And it can be an issue for the buyer, because now the buyer's saying, well, my bank's only willing to lend $295,000, and maybe I feel like I've agreed to pay more than what it's worth, or maybe I just can't come up with the $5,000 difference for it. So for sellers, when does it make sense? It makes sense if the appraisal is way off of what we actually feel like the value is, and we are confident we can sell the property for more. So for example, you've got a $300,000 house. We list it for $300,000. We sell it for $300,000. The appraisal comes in at $275, and we say, no way, no how. We can absolutely sell this house for, $300,000 again or something close to it. And it is not worth it to us to take a $25,000 price cut just to make this deal go through. We're not willing to give up that much money. We're confident we can get a much higher offer, so we're just going to walk away from this deal.
Could you get a second opinion?
Yes. It's a little tough though, and that's a whole different podcast.
Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Well, maybe not a whole, but maybe like a shorty.
That's an idea for your idea hat.
Oh, there you go. The imaginary idea hat off of Lucas's head. Maddie, when does it not make sense to walk away?
If you may not get as much on a second offer.
Yes. So, where it makes sense maybe not to walk away is you got a $300,000 house that maybe should be priced at $275, but we were being kind of ambitious. And then the appraisal comes in at $275, and maybe we're not so sure that we're going to get a second offer as high, or maybe we're not as sure that we're going to be able to get somebody to actually appraise a house for $275.
Well, that happens a lot with like escalation clauses and stuff, right? That's the biggest opportunity for a failed appraisal there.
Yeah, so good question. When in a competitive situation, when a property gets bid up by multiple bidders, and it goes $5,000-$10,000 over asking price, then you always got to be mindful of that, because buyers get emotional and they get invested in the transaction. They're like, I'll give you whatever we need to give you. We'll give you $10,000 over. Well, at the end of the day, the property has to appraise. So if it doesn't, then that's going to create a problem. As a seller, when it doesn't make sense to walk away, maybe is, let's say that appraisal comes in like $5,000 short, and you're like, man, I don't want to give up $5,000, but
especially when you've gone through this entire process already, because the appraisal is one of the last things that needs to happen, right?
It's kind of one of the last big puzzle pieces to fall in place. But if we look and say, hey, if we go back on we sold it the first weekend for full price, and then it came up $5,000 short. If we go back on the market, you've kind of lost that initial opportunity of when a property is hot, new, and fresh on the market, and you may or may not get, another full price offer. You may get an offer that's $5,000 or $10,000 below. So you may just end up in the exact same spot, 60 days from now, dealing with a whole nother transaction. So, what's next?
For buyers.
When was the first time you'd walk away?
If you've realized you've way overpaid.
Yes. So, thankfully, we don't run into this issue. I could probably count on one hand the issues that I've had in an appraisal with a buyer. One of the things that we do for our clients is we always run the numbers on a property. So we do like a little market analysis on a property before they make an offer, just so they're not overpaying. And they're not overpaying on the property. So we usually don't have these issues. But if you don't have an agent that's running the numbers on the property and you find out you've overpaid $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 on a property, and you realize that after the fact, then that appraisal is actually going to help you coming in short, because it's going to give you an opportunity to walk away from the deal. So that's a good time. When do you not want to walk away if you're a buyer?
If an appraisal comes in slightly under.
Yeah, so this is a time when you may not want to. You may want to, but you may not want to. So if an appraisal comes in $2,000, $5,000 short, and you really like the home, you might make the decision of, hey, I know I'm overpaying for this house, but I'm just overpaying a little bit. I'm willing to kick in the $2,000, $3,000, $5,000, whatever the number may be, to make this deal go through, because we really love the house. We can see our kids growing up here. I could see myself living here for 20, 30 years. At the end of the day, if you're going to stay in a house long-term, you're probably going to get, all of that's going to get washed away by appreciation. So that's something to think through, is like, now, if you're going to be in the house for 2 years, then yeah, maybe you need to be a little more precise on your value there. But if you're going to be getting out of it, or if you're not going to be getting out of that house for the next 20, 30 years, it may be worth it to overpay just a little bit if it's the right house.
How else can you rectify? You said the buyer can maybe kick in the difference, but are there any other ways that you could rectify that appraisal situation?
Rectify.
That's an SAT word.
Is it?
Just like ad nauseum.
Yeah, just like that.
We don't talk about that in this house.
Wow, this is Maddie's house now.
Apparently, you can stay here.
I do live here.
You
Pretty
need
much.
to paint the walls.
I was thinking about that low key. Gary Duda, if you're watching.
Yeah. Good luck. Yes, a good question. So if you have an appraisal issue, one of four things can happen. The seller can basically just take less money, and the purchase price can be reduced down to the appraised price. The buyer can make up the difference, so they can just come cash out of pocket. If for example, $300,000 house appraised for $295,000, the buyer can say, "Hey, I'm just going to pay the $5,000, make up the difference." The third option, what typically happens is buyer and seller meet somewhere in the middle. So the buyer says, "I'm willing to give up $2,500." The buyer says, "I'll kick in another $2,500," and we meet somewhere in the middle. Or if buyer and seller cannot come to an agreement and there's still that gap in price, then after a certain amount of time, both parties can walk away.
I always thought only the buyer could walk away at that point.
There's certain rules and guidelines. It's all spelled out in our contract.
Oh, right, that thing
Which
that I probably should.
Which you've read front and back.
Extensively.
Yes.
That thing we did a whole podcast on.
Yeah. Yikes. Yikes. What's next?
Loan issues.
Yes. All right. So loan issues to sellers. So what this means is you get into a deal and then all of a sudden, even though that lender told you up front, hey, these buyers are great, 8 million credit score, they got tons of money in the bank, all of a sudden the finances start getting a little shaky and the deal starts getting a little wobbly.
Don't rock the boat.
Yeah, you like the sound effects there. All right, so where we tell our seller clients, where you might want to walk away, is if there is no clear end in sight. In other words, the lender says there's this issue we got to work through, but they're not really able to give you a clear timeline of like, this is when we're going to be able to resolve said issue. And or you're not getting straight answers from the lender. That is one of my biggest pet peeves. You want to tee me off.
I've seen that in person.
Let us get 3 to 4 weeks into a transaction, and then all of a sudden, a week before closing, you tell me we've got a lender issue or we've got a loan issue, and then you can't give me straight answers as far as why we're having the issue, what you're going to be able to do to resolve the issue, and when that issue is going to get resolved. Does
that frustrate you more than them changing title companies on us at the last minute?
That's frustrating as well, but deals from the lender, and it's usually like the lenders that haven't been that communicative throughout the process.
That's why we check in with lenders
that is why we bug the crap out of lenders. So any lenders out there that aren't going to do their job and they want to bring us a shaky deal, just know we're going to be up your backside so far that I don't know what's going to happen.
I just got like chills a little bit. It was really scary.
Man, that makes me
glad I'm
so
not
hot
your child.
so hot under the collar. All right. What when do you not want to walk away, Maddie, if you're a seller?
Well, if the issue has been identified and there is a time frame in which it can be resolved.
Yeah. So once again, a lot of times when this happens, emotions are running high. Sellers can get very, very frustrated. Maybe they've already moved out of the house. Maybe it's costing them money to continue to own the house if it's vacant. Expectations have not been met. You said you were going to close October the 15th. It's now November the 1st, and we're not closed, and people get all bent out of shape. At the end of the day, if there's a clear end in sight, if they say, hey, we need 2 weeks, they can tell you exactly identify what the issue is, what we're going to do to resolve it, when we're going to be able to resolve it, then you may not want to cancel that deal too quickly, because at the end of the day, you always got to think through, okay, where do we go from here if we do can this deal? As pissed off as you are, what's going to happen if you don't have this deal? Well, we got to go back on the market. We got to get ourselves another deal. Hope we get as good of a deal. And then even if you get a contract tomorrow, it's more than likely going to be another 30 to 45 days
to get to closing.
So Most times, as frustrating as it is, it makes sense to just hang in there in the deal, so long as you're getting clear answers from the lender and there's a clear timeline and a clear game plan of what needs to be done.
And the buyer can't walk away at this point, right? I mean, obviously it wouldn't make sense for them to, but they can't, like, based on the contract, right?
Correct. Yeah, and that's why I didn't put a little section in there for buyers, because most of the time the buyers are just trying to work through. And if the buyer's got a loan issue, it's probably going to be a loan issue no matter what property they're going to make an offer on. So they're just kind of hanging in there because it's no skin off their back.
Yeah.
Last but not least,
title issues.
I will have a lot of questions about this one.
Yeah. So, as a seller, you've got to produce clean title.
Can you explain what clean title means?
Without encumbrances. So title is basically the chain of ownership from start to finish. So, like, for example, if there was a home that was built in the 1950s and Daniel went back in time and bought it from the builder, and then it gets sold to Maddie in the 1970s, and then I come along 2018. And
why are you the youngest in this situation?
Because
he's not the youngest. He's just the time traveler.
Because it's my podcast. Anyway.
I thought it was our podcast. My mistake.
So if for whatever reason, so let's say Maddie sold me the property, and then somewhere Daniel's great-grandchildren come along and just say, hey, that property never properly transferred from my great-grandfather to Maddie, they can come back and they can sue me as the now property owner because they say, hey, we still have ownership rights to this title. That's
why you get title insurance.
That's why you get title insurance. That's a very simplified explanation of title. We should probably have a title rep on to explain title because they can do a much better job than I could ever.
We'll find a title rep friend, and then
it's on the schedule.
We can bring them on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Maddie.
You're welcome. I'm here to help.
Yeah, obviously. So important note to here. So kind of like this is the reverse of loan issues. So loan issues are usually sole issues of the buyers. Title issues are usually the sole issues of the sellers. We've got one going right now. It's kind of a nightmare, but we're working through it. But so once title issues are made known in our contract in Central Virginia, the sellers have 60 days to correct any title issues. In other words, the buyer cannot just jump out of the transaction. They've got to give the seller 60 days to work out the title issues. The buyer can then walk away after 60 days, but within that 60-day period, they have to stay in. Interesting enough, the seller has no obligation either to pay for any of the buyer's expenses related to their loan. So a lot of times what happens if a seller has title issues, a buyer will say, well, my rate lock's going to expire. We need you to pay $1,500 to extend our rate lock. You may want to as a seller just to keep everybody happy, but you actually have no obligation to do so.
Yeah, the buyer's agent will often... I mean, we had one that had some title issues a couple months ago.
Yes.
And the buyer's agent was asking us to do exactly that, to help put something towards their rate lock.
Yeah, and our clients were like, no way, Jose. Which is their right to say that. So,
yeah.
So buyers, as far as when it makes sense to walk away, when it doesn't, I would say it really depends on what the title issue is. A lot of times the most common title issues that we see are unclosed liens. So what happens a lot of times is somebody gets an equity line or home equity line of credit against the house. If you ever get a HELOC or an equity line or a second mortgage or anything like that, make sure if you pay that up, make sure they actually close out that loan. Because a lot of times what will happen is sellers will pay that off and it'll have a zero balance, but it's still an open line of credit.
But Chris, what's a HELOC?
A home equity line of credit. We just said that.
Yeah, but you didn't explain what it is.
God, okay.
I didn't ask for what the acronym stood for.
All right, so here we go. So home equity line of credit. So let's say you've got, once again, $300,000 house. You've got $100,000 left on your mortgage. So you have $200,000 worth of equity. You can go down to your local credit union, your bank, whoever lends money, and you can go to Vegas. You can go to a casino. They do these, which is kind of weird. But
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. They'll let you ruin your life.
You can get married. You can take out a HELOC.
When are we going to Vegas?
Yeah, next show. But no, it's $300,000 house. You owe $100,000 on your mortgage. You can take out, say, like a $50,000 home equity line of credit. And it's essentially a second mortgage against your house. But if those pop up to where they say, hey, there's an unsettled or an unclosed home equity line of credit, they can take a few weeks, but those we can usually go through. And as a buyer, you may not want to walk away. You may not have the option, but you may not want to walk away from a transaction if it's that, because those are usually able to get settled. Kind of like the loan, you want to know, what the issue is, how long it's going to take to resolve, what the clear plan of action is. Where title issues can get very sticky and where the deal that we are currently in can potentially get a little sticky is if there are heirs to a property that we were not aware of when we sold the property, but came up on the title search. And then you got to go track down heirs. They've got to, sign off that they don't want any ownership interest. So they got to sign a quitclaim deed, or maybe they do want an interest because now there's money to be had. And, maybe we don't feel like the house was sold for as much as it did. So that can get a little sticky. So as a buyer, that may be an opportunity that you want to walk away, is when there's multiple heirs.
Oh, God.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun one.
Please don't put that in the universe.
It's going to be a fun one. So hopefully we get squared away. But that, folks, is the end of the show. When to walk away from a deal.
Fire round.
Do you feel like you learned something?
I do feel like I learned something. But the better question here is, does Daniel feel like he learned something?
Daniel, do you feel like you learned anything today?
Absolutely.
This is your first podcast you're staying on.
Yeah, like I've never looked into like home ownership before working with you guys, right? Like I'm younger. I'm looking for a house for another few years. This is incredibly informative. Like I'll be on the market in 2 to 3 years, and this is incredibly important to hear about. So like people like Maddie and I's age who are like early to mid 20s.
You're older than me?
Yeah, whatever.
By several years.
How old are you?
25.
Okay.
Yeah. So like somebody like 21 to like 28 years old wants to know this, and like not something I would have thought to think about.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
That's what you're for.
That's right. That's right. And now to the fire round. By the way, we spent a ton of money on podcast and video and all this equipment. So
his laptop should be. Oh wait, that's yours.
Yeah, no,
that's not it.
It should be coming in here pretty
Mine's
soon.
black.
It should be by the end of the day today. Did you see that?
It's shipping from Chicago. I don't think it's going to be here by today. So anyway, all right, fire round. Maddie, hit us with the questions from the social mediums.
All right.
And I will do my best to rapid fire them off.
When's the very last point you can walk away from a deal, assuming no loan or title issues?
I mean, there's multiple times throughout a transaction. So kind of a hard question to answer. I will give you a funny instance, though, just to say something related to the question. We had Mr. and Mrs. K, who you loved.
I actually loved, or I...
No, you really liked them. But anyway, the seller...
Oh, I'm an idiot.
Yeah. The seller was a for sale by owner. He was from out of the area. He was a military guy, and we love our active military and our veterans. But this guy, I think, thought he knew more than he actually knew, and you don't know what you don't know. So he didn't realize that he had to get us the homeowners association documents per Virginia law.
I never would have known that either.
Yeah, which that's why you shouldn't be selling real estate by yourself. But anyway.
Your wife is watching our podcast from my thing.
Hi, Allie. How are you doing, baby?
Hi, Allie.
So anyway, so he didn't realize he had to get us these. So I finally, like a week before closing, I was like, hey, by the way, are you going to get us these? He was like, oh, God. Like, yeah, let me get that. So he literally did not get it to us until the day of closing. And we're literally sitting at the attorney's office, and the attorney goes, hey, just so you guys know, if you want, you can terminate this contract right now. And they're like, no, we want to buy the house. And he was like, okay, it's my responsibility to tell you that. So literally,
oh my goodness.
I mean, you can imagine if you're a seller and like your property's been tied up for 45 days and it's the day of closing and you find out that like the buyer's terminated at the closing table and had every right to do so.
That guy wanted me to, that seller, he wanted me to do it for him too.
Yeah. He was
like, that's not our responsibility.
He was interesting. He sent his girlfriend, his live-in girlfriend, over to their house because like he wasn't negotiating with us. So he sent his live-in girlfriend over to our client's house, which I don't know how he even found that out. to like try to like work out the deal, because I was the one that was like getting in the way. Like if I just had gotten out of the way, they'd been able to make this deal happen.
Oh my goodness. I did not know that.
You are certified crazy.
How did that person find out where they lived?
I think because it was contingent, so he wanted us to send us a copy of the contract. It was interesting. All right, next question.
Do buyers ever make outrageous requests just to push the sellers to release them from the contract?
Yeah, that's actually a strategy. So that was our backup strategy with Mr. and Mrs. A, is because...
Really?
Yeah. So we didn't really have a clear cut. We couldn't unilaterally by ourselves terminate the contract. So we didn't have the ability just to like cancel. So what I did was I said, I went to the agent and I said, hey, look, if you want, I can play the game and I can just load up the inspection addendum and just make outrageous requests to where we know you're not going to agree, and then you're going to, we'll end up having the ability to walk away when you don't agree, or we can just both agree that we want to go our separate ways right now. And she was like, yeah, just send us over the release. But yeah, that is a strategy. If a buyer is really looking to get out, you can just make outrageous requests in a repairs addendum. They have to have some basis in what was found, but you can kind of fluff stuff up.
That's what I was talking about earlier. That's what happened to us.
Yeah. And that happened to us too. So.
All right. Do buyers have to give the seller the opportunity to fix things that come up on the inspection report, or can they just walk away?
So up until about a couple weeks ago, they had to give the seller the opportunity to fix these items. Now there's a new provision in our contract. They just rewrote our contracts and they put in a provisional, an optional paragraph where if you check it off, the buyer can terminate the contract if they don't like what was found on the home inspection. What's going to be interesting to see is how often it's actually used, because as an agent representing a seller, I don't know that I would want the buyer. I'd always want the opportunity for our clients to fix stuff. I wouldn't want a buyer that can just willy-nilly kind of cancel a contract.
So if they check that box, that means that they can walk away if they want to, but not that they necessarily will?
It gives them the option to walk away from the transaction without having to make any repairs requests.
I don't like that.
No, I don't like it either. And it's going to be interesting to see.
We were caveat emptor, which meant more power. Like the sellers had more like...
It's 2019, Maddie. Things are changing.
I don't like it.
I don't like it either, but it's going to be interesting to see like how often that actually gets used. It's very common in other areas for a buyer to have the right just to cancel based on a home inspection, but hasn't been the norm in our area. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, that doesn't seem totally fair, if I'm honest. But, that's business.
Life's not fair, Maddie. Come on.
Okay, don't chastise me just because you're an old man.
I am surprised our legal counsel for our Central Virginia Association of Realtors didn't call and ask Maddie how she felt about that.
I wish they would have. If more people asked me how I felt about things, this world would look entirely different. That's for a totally different podcast. We can make a whole different podcast called "How Does Maddie Feel About Things?"
in today's episode of How Maddie Feels, yeah,
I would love to just do that. That would be great.
All right, moving on.
Last question. So if a house has a very large DOM, meaning days on the market,
throwing out lingo.
I was trying to be mindful of our not real estate savvy individuals.
I thought DOM meant dogs on Mars. So,
All right, last question. Let's wrap this up.
If there's like a high DOM, does that necessarily indicate that... Stop! I'm trying to get through this question. Stop making fun of me.
All right, keep reading.
I don't like this boys club here.
Boys club.
Can I finish my sentence?
Please.
Was the middle of my sentence interrupting the beginning of yours?
Are you able to finish the question?
If you would allow me to, do you give me permission to finish?
I think our studio time's about to run out here, so
I'm kicking y'all out.
All right, let's go.
Our producer.
Let's go.
So does a high DOM necessarily indicate any big issues with the house that might deter a buyer?
Yeah, it could. I mean, anytime a home's been sitting on the market, it's usually one of two things or a combination of two things. Either, it could be crappy marketing, and that happens sometimes, but a lot of times it's either overpriced or there's something wrong with the house that maybe is not fully apparent from the listing. Like anytime a listing looks really good online, but it's been sitting for a while, it's kind of like, there's something that's not in those photos. So yeah, usually, not automatically, but yeah, usually that's the case. So.
Okay.
And that is episode number 7. We appreciate y'all tuning in. Hit us up on social media. Let us know what you think. If you think we suck, if you think we are good, let us know that. If
make your own podcast about it.
Yeah, make your own podcast about how terrible we are. If you have topics that you want to see, we would like to know that so we can talk about stuff that you want to hear. Thank y'all for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you on the next one.
Thanks for joining us for the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show. If you have any questions or suggestions for future episodes, please contact Chris Elliott at chris@chriselliottrealestate.com or by phone at 804-980-1898. And please join us again next time for the Chris Elliott Real Estate Show.